Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Stillwater. We are a diverse religious community seeking spiritual experience and all forms of knowledge in an atmosphere of acceptance, love, and respect. Our mission is to protect and perpetuate religious freedom, tolerance, and knowledge, to challenge injustice, and to nurture and serve one another and the wider community. This morning, our service leader will be Reverend Mark Christian. We have musicians, Annye Love, and our UU singers. And I didn't get all the names ahead. And Julie Longjohn. More? Okay, start again.
I think everybody's got it. Everybody's Julie.
We have Julie's and Mary Kate's, and I know Linda is one of them. Who else did I miss? Who did I miss? Okay. We also have guests this morning, which is nice. We have Logan Schemmer, a new visitor. We have Dana Cole, who actually is a member, and one other, Debbie. If anybody else would like to be identified, I'd be very pleased. Welcome to everyone. Of course, we are going to have our annual meeting. You're all welcome to join that, guests and everybody else. And we'll continue with announcements.
As Mike said, immediately following the service, we will have our annual congregational meeting. We're hoping to run it very efficiently because it comes before social time, and that's when you're invited to come share snacks and conversation. Today is the first Sunday in May, and I do not know if it's still considered committee meeting Sunday since we're having the congregational meeting, but if your committee needs to meet, this is often the day to do it. The Crafty UUs meet on the second Saturday of the month, which is this coming Saturday, May 9th, at 2 p.m. in the forum room. Bring whatever you want to work on and share some time together. The contact person is Joe Melnick. Next Sunday's sermon will be provided by Reverend Shiitake Mama. Her sermon title will be, What Comes Next? As she mentioned in the May newsletter, what do people say who have had near-death experiences, or people who get glimpses of the other side before they die? We'll depart from our regular order of service and from our regular definitions of crossing over. The forum this month is going to be on the third Sunday, May 17th, instead of the usual second Sunday. Haridas Heights is going to be presenting a forum on the dimension of being. The dimension of being is far more than what we think we are. True inner peace and joy arise when we discover this more, and it is here all the time. If you have announcements, please come up to a microphone.
Hi, I'm Lynn Fiesel, and I have a couple of announcements. One is an organization with the UU called UU The Vote. It is Ignite Solidarity and Reimagine Democracy. The UUs have always been pretty active in political issues, and this one is centered around the recent decision about the gerrymandering in Louisiana and how that is going to affect minorities. So I encourage people to look this up, look up the information on UU the Vote on the website and become involved, because it's a matter of showing up. It's a matter of being there and being active. And as another part of that, today the League of Women Voters is sponsoring an author, Lindsay Cormack. She came in from New York City. She wrote a book called How to Raise a Citizen and Why It's Up to You to Do It. She's going to be presenting today at 2 o'clock at the Stillwater Community Center, presenting information on her book. So I encourage people to attend this also, because it's a matter of being involved and resisting and, as I said, showing up.
I'm Susan Danilovich, and I live at Oak Creek.
I live at Oak Creek, and recently we had a presentation by a representative or the director from Life Center, which is the adult daycare service facility in town. And she mentioned that she was trying to get the word out to the churches and hadn't had much luck with that so far. So I said, I'll take your pamphlets there, because if you've got some loved ones who might need a place, or especially if the caregiver needs respite care, they can take somebody there, because they do have a lot of services. So I'll just leave the paperwork somewhere back there.
Other announcements? I think we're ready for our prelude.
Lately, we have been doing some songs from the Singing Resistance, and this song is from the Justice Choir, which is basically the same idea, singing our way through the things that are happening right now. This song is so simple. It's basically made of 2 words, and I hope you'll join us when you feel ready. But it is around, and I just want to mention that Catherine Ross practiced with us all the last couple of times, and she's so sick she's not able to make it today, sadly. So keep her in your thoughts. But we're going to do our best. Okay. Love is love is love is love. Love is love is
Thank you, Johnny.
Oh, you want me to trip it for you?
Where do I want to fall? The time and the opportunity to come together is precious. It is our coming here together that makes this time sacred, makes this time holy, that lifts it to a place where we can esteem to be our truest, highest selves. I invite you to find a moment for silent meditation and prayer, to center yourself, to put aside the business and busyness of the day. It will be there for you to pick it up later. To feel yourself here. And know that this time which we create together, this space which we create together, is holy. This day is a gift of love, a gift from God, a gift from life itself. Come, let us worship together, for this is the day we have been given to live in, to love in, and in time to die in. Let us rejoice in our capacity to think, to feel, to hear, and to understand. And let us rejoice in the promise and the possibility of this day. Let there be light to drive away the darkness. Let there be wisdom to shine on the unknown. Let there be love to heal our aloneness. Let each of us be a light for one another.
Our first hymn is number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Enter Good morning. Another story from American Storytelling. August House was the publisher, and A Pleasant Despain is the author, and illustrated by Joe Schlitka. That's probably not saying that right, but it's close. Okay, so this one is called Granddaughter's Sled, and it's a tale from Russia. A man named Ivan lived with his elderly father and young daughter. At that time, so long ago, old people were thought to be useless. They were taken to the forest and left to die all alone. Now that the old man was feeble and could no longer earn a living, Ivan tied him onto his daughter's sled. "Where are you taking grandfather?" asked the girl. "To the forest," replied Ivan. "But why, father? He is too weak to cut down trees or pick berries." "Never mind, daughter. It's something I must do." "Can I come too?" asked the girl. "Yes, but ask no more questions." The girl ran behind the sled, stopping here and there to pick wildflowers for her grandfather. When they came to the middle of the forest, Ivan said, "I'm sorry to leave you here, father, but you know how it is among our people." "You can't leave grandfather out here," said the girl. "He will starve or be killed by the wolves. He is old and can no longer work. I have no choice, daughter." The girl thought for a moment and said, "But we can't leave my sled behind, because when you grow old, I'll need it to carry you into the forest." Ivan frowned and then realized the truth of the girl's statement. "You are right, daughter. Let's take grandfather home, but don't tell any of our neighbors that he is still with us." They hid the old man in a back room and kept his existence a great secret. Soon afterward, a terrible famine swept the land. Food became scarce and the people grew hungry. Ivan had less and less to take to his aged father. The old man did not complain. The famine continued, and the villagers ate the last of the wheat and rye. They even ate the seed grain and had nothing to plant in the spring. There was no hope of survival. Ivan took his old father a small piece of hard bread and told him that the people were starving. "Nonsense," said grandfather. "Take the straw roof from the barn and thrash it well. You will find that there is more than a handful of grain left in the thatch. Plant the grain and you will get a healthy crop." Ivan did as he was told and soon had a fine crop of rye. The villagers were grateful and asked him where he got such excellent advice. "From my father, a wise man indeed." "Your father is dead," said one of the villagers. "Grandfather is not dead," explained Ivan's daughter. "We have hidden him, but not his wisdom. Grandfather has saved all of our lives." So grandfather came out of hiding, and from that time forth, old people were honored and respected in that village.
This reading is by James Luther Adams, a 20th century, he died in 1998, 20th century theologian, Harvard professor, and Unitarian Universalist minister. I call that church free. I call that church free, which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence, that sustaining and transforming power not made with human hands. It binds together families and generations, protecting against the idolatry of any human claim to the absolute truth or authority. This covenant is a charter and responsibility and joy of worship in the face of death as well as life. I call that church free, which brings individuals into a caring, trusting fellowship that protects and nourishes their integrity and spiritual freedom. that yearns to belong to the Church Universal. It is open to insight and conscience from every source. It bursts through rigid tradition, giving rise to new and living language, to new and broader fellowship. It is a pilgrim church, a servant church, on an adventure of the Spirit. The goal is the prophethood and priesthood of all believers, the one for the liberty of prophesying, the other for the ministry of healing. It aims to find unity in diversity under the promptings of the Spirit that bloweth where it listeth and maketh all things new.
It's time for the offertory. Your donations support this church. It is supported by your donations. And this month, we will be sharing our plate with Wings of Hope.
I don't usually wander that far over there, but I never really know where I'm going, so I'm gonna move that a little farther out of my way. No, out of the way. I want it where I won't trip on it. Or otherwise make a prop of it.
You're kind of right in the middle. You're right in the middle, and is that where you want to be?
Yes, that's right where I want to be. Thank you. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. This is the 6th part of the sermon series that I've decided to do this year. I preach every 4th Sunday and every other 1st Sunday, and this is the ever 1st Sunday. I like to get a structure to things. It helps me. And so I try to create, I've always liked doing sermon series. And it seems like a good opportunity to do this in this Better with UU history. And I think I'm going to continue it where I can continue to use that song next year, should the church decide to extend my contract and hire me for next year. Nothing's guaranteed in this world. But I think next year I'm going to take that middle piece, what are we? Where do we come from? What are we? And explore what are we? But today I'm looking at our history, and today particularly that last piece, where are we going? The purpose, of course, to look at history is to understand the present, but hopefully to try and gauge a path into the future. So where are we going? What is this history that I speak of? Now, some of you can probably recite this right along with me. I've told it to you so many times now. We start in the Protestant Reformation with the shift away from the unity, the Catholicism of the Catholic Church, the all-in-one and everything is one, to an individualism, which is what comes out of the Protestant Reformation when Martin Luther thinks that the individuals in the churches should be able to read the gospel for themselves. It's up to them to understand. And then it moves through Europe to Lutheranism and Calvinism, and ends up in Eastern Europe, in Transylvania and Poland in particular, with the Radical Reformation. Yes, we are the children of the Radical Reformation. And the Radical Reformation were radical, first of all, because most of them were Anabaptists. That means that they believed a believer's baptism. It did no good to baptize an infant because they could have no assent to what was going on. That for something to be useful, it has to be meaningful to the person involved. And that's one of our core things. Again, that's that individualist streak. Unless it means something to the individual, it doesn't have the kind of value we're looking for it. But they were also tending to be pacifists, tend to be utopian in some ways, in some cases. They tended to have, in some cases, vegetarian lifestyles. And that's where we come. But that didn't go very long. It didn't take long before these people asserting these individual freedoms got into the way of the people who didn't have so much freedom or didn't want people to have so much freedom, and they were forced to either go underground or to leave the area. In Transylvania, they went underground, and they became a hidden church for several centuries. In places like Poland, they tended to flee. One of the places they fled to was the Netherlands, to Leiden, which is also where the Pilgrims fled from England. So we have this connection, two groups of people coming together, not directly, but rubbing off on each other. To give you just the idea of this place in Leiden, Leiden is 17 miles from Rotterdam, 17 miles. That's what, the distance from here to Perkins, thereabouts? Close. Even in a day before cars, there would be plenty of activity between those two places. Well, the Pilgrims didn't like the fact that there were these people over there who were not of this strict reformist tradition that they were, Calvinists through and through. And in Rotterdam as well, next to Leiden, was not only where the anti-Trinitarians from Eastern Europe went to, but that is also where the Catholic humanist Erasmus had his school. So humanism, which was reclaiming the history and the knowledge of the ancient Greeks and Romans and bringing it forward into that time, also would not have been happy to them. So the Pilgrims left, they went back to England and then came to the United States, forming what is now, some 600 years later, a Unitarian church. The church that the Pilgrims founded is a Unitarian church, as are many of the churches in New England that were formed by the Pilgrims and the Puritans in what's called the Standing Order. That means that they were the people in charge. They got taxed. They taxed the parish to support the church, realizing that the church was not the building, the church was the people. But there was a building and it got taxed, and that's why the Pilgrims in particular called it the meeting house as opposed to the church. We would say we came to the meeting house today, as opposed to saying we came to church. That goes okay for a while. They're in New England and they're being their standing order selves. And in time, I think those roots that kind of ran parallel to Erasmus and the humanists and to those anti-Trinitarians who'd come up from Eastern Europe begin to meld over. And that leads to a conflict. It was a conflict because the church was changing. One of the ways this conflict came about there was in something called a very arcane idea, the halfway covenant. But here's what it was. The Pilgrims and the Puritans said that you had to have not only your baptism to be a member of church, but to be a full-fledged member, you had to have an outward sign of conversion. They weren't doing that, but it would have been the same thing today with speaking in tongues as a sign of conversion. But what happened is that this first generation or second generation of Pilgrims and Puritans started having kids who were baptized, but they never had their outward show of conversion. So therefore they couldn't be the members of the church, the members of the ecclesia, the body, which meant that their children couldn't get baptized. So the grandparents over here who baptized their children, who can't baptize theirs, created the halfway covenant as a little side door that did not fit well. That was the source of the first Great Awakening, I think, which was in the early 1700s, 1720 to 1760, 70, something. Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. A conflict there. Now, every time that we've taken one status, it has become orthodox. Yes, even Unitarians have orthodoxy. But there's always a heretic who comes along and wants to push beyond it or beside it or through it. That happened with those halfway covenants. It happens again in 1800 or so when the Unitarians begin to take over New England, and it upsets more and causes the Unitarian controversy. But things kind of settle down, and we settle into this form of Christianity which is influenced by reason and the elements of the Enlightenment, very definitely Enlightenment influenced. And that goes along well for a while until, and this is my favorite line in the world, until Emerson takes a walk in the woods. Ralph Waldo Emerson takes a walk in the woods and in his own way comes back and says, there is so much divinity in the world itself that a walk in the woods can provide as much knowledge of God as a lifetime spent in Bible study. That's radical. That was radical to the traditional Unitarians who were not transcendentalists. So again, we have this levels being built up, strata being built up. There's this individualist strata, there's this early Christian status, the individual strata. There's this idea of reason coming in from there. So Emerson does that, and that then kind of settles in for a while. And then there's a shift to the West. By the West, I mean Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, those kind of exotic places. And that creates tension too. Because now we have a tradition, that's a community that is spread out halfway across the continent. How do they maintain bonds and they change individually? And that creates tensions itself. And that goes along fine. But what they've done through Emerson and the Transcendentalists as well is to open the door to world religions. And Lincoln and Jenkin Lloyd Jones in 1893 creates the World Council of Religions along with the World's Fair of 1893 in Chicago, bringing the first time together that religious leaders and scholars from all the world's religious traditions come together and spend a month together, learning from each other, teaching each other, knowing who each other is. And that goes along for a while. And then we have another development, and there's an orthodoxy in that. And that orthodoxy says, well, maybe this idea of religion doesn't really require God. Maybe it's about human beings, and humanism arises, and there's a tension and a fight. And what was the orthodox position gets eroded down and becomes a new orthodoxy, which includes the humanism. And humanism even becomes a veritable, unquestionable reality in our movement. Even to the point in many places outside of New England, a atheistic humanism becomes the norm. An atheistic humanism becomes the norm. That becomes the orthodoxy. And that works along just fine until a certain number of people who happen to not be man realize that all this humanism is talking about man all the time. Man, men, God is always he, people are always he, and feminism moves in. Feminism brings with it a number of things. Not only does it bring in the idea of being open to the whole, not just a part of the community. We see that same thing in the tension in the United States, where we get from a government just of the white, freeborn people to being including of other people. Same kind of expansion, broadening it out, that it's not just that, it's more than that. And that goes along and that opens the door to this appreciation of older religious styles, paganism, the study of goddesses. So it wasn't just God, it was goddess to go along with God, to offset that. That opens that door, like I said, to paganism, which opens the door to environmentalism, which opens the door to a whole variety of things that dominate us in the late part of the 20th century into the 21st century. Now, something is happening here that I'm really working on trying to understand what it is. But up to that point, when we took on social actions, it was an actual action. We were standing against slavery with abolition. We were standing against the isolation of women by standing for suffrage. By doing those things, they were actions. And something happens around 2000 or so, or maybe a little after that, maybe in the 2015s is late. And that is that we become to begin far more interested in identity rather than action. I'm on a number of internet posts with UU ministers. And this is the time of year when ministers have announced that they're leaving somewhere, so they're opening somewhere. And they come onto these chats and they talk up the place they're leaving, whether they're leaving as an interim or as a settled minister or developmental or whatever it is. And they talk about the lovely things in this place. And for the last couple of years, what I've seen in that this is the typical way that conversation has gone. This congregation is about 33%, we'll just take thirds. Thirds under 30. A third from 30 to 60, and a third from 60 to 90. Well, that's okay. That's a demographic split. But then they go on to say, this congregation is fully 2/3 gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered. It is their identity. It has become the identity. So whereas in the past we stood for LGBT rights because it's the right thing to do, it has now become, it's a question of our identity. Is it our identity to be that? I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you, though, that in the 1980s and the 1990s, when we started becoming well more aware of LGBTQ issues, we had a lot of gay and lesbian people, bisexual people come to our communities because everybody else was telling them that they're horrible. They're going to hell. You are evil because of your identity as a gay, lesbian, transgender person. And we didn't say that. We said, come on in. We've got room for you. Well, the thing was, some of those people really did like the other aspects of Unitarianism, universalism that they saw. And some were really just looking for a place that they could have their Christian experience without being told they were going to hell. And slowly over time, gay and lesbian churches began to develop. And they did have the identity of being LGBT congregations. Whereas in the past, they were just looking for a place that they could be free to not be condemned. We have shifted, I think, subtly in the last few years to where it's now a question of identity. Whereas if someone was to ask about the identity of this church, they would say, well, it's old but getting a little younger, and white but not getting any less white. Is that a problem? Now, this is my whole ministry, I've been in this conversation. There was a process called Journey Toward Wholeness and Jubilee World, Jubilee, those kinds of things, which were focused on anti-racism. And I agree, and I work hard to put out the idea of anti-racism. But I never believed, and I don't believe to this day, that you can measure our effectiveness as anti-racists about the number of non-white persons we have joining our churches. A black colleague of mine once said to me, do you think people are sitting around in the black church and saying, where are all the white folks? It's not their question. But we've become this identity source. So that's one thing I want to express, that is the big transition I'm seeing right now. We've gone from being tied to action, what I might call orthopraxis, right action, standing up for the right political moves, the right social moves, the right spiritual foundations to help us lead forward, to becoming more judged by how effective we are in changing our face, changing what we look like. And I'm not sure what to do with that. I do see a parallel in the study of Judaism and Christianity. Shifts that has happened in Christianity away from Judaism. In Judaism, sin was an action. In Christianity, thanks to Paul, sin has become a state of being. And I think we are going in our churches away from things being actions to being state of beings. And I'm not sure that's for the right. The other thing I want to and I'm going to shift here, and in a minute I'm going to have an even bigger shift in gears, so just to let you know. Shifting, where was that? Oh, the new statement of our values, the 6 values around the centering on love, is a big shift. It's a big shift from what had been not so old a shift, which was the principles and purposes, because they didn't come around until, they didn't start becoming popular until the late 1980s, early 1990s. So they've only been with us 40 years or so. But we put that aside. Now, they're still in there. We still have those same things, the inherent worth and dignity of all persons, those sorts of things, the interdependent web of all existence. We still have those in there, but we've refocused them into this new model. I looked at that and said, boy, that's a great thing that was produced by a public relations agency. It is marvelously clean. It speaks, but does it speak for us? There are 3 things in particular that have been identifiers of Unitarianism and Universalism from back in the 1500s. Freedom, reason, and tolerance. Those have been 3 bellwether characteristics of our movements. But in those 6 statements, the freedom, reason, and tolerance don't appear. Justice, yes. Equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Those are all good. And you can find places that all those 3 things fit in. But freedom has always been our core. We are oftentimes called the free church because of that notion of freedom. That was the sense that James Luther Adams was getting to in that reading there, is that the world is alive. It is constantly changing. And its freedom is our freedom if we learn to live with it. But it feels like now we're putting aside that idea of freedom. And reason. Reason has been our long biggest thing. You know, one of the big jokes about the Unitarian Universalism, and it seems to be appropriate for today, which is our annual meeting in this church, is that the only two things Unitarian Universalists agree on is congregational polity and Robert's Rules of Order. Shifting. That loss of reason. Where does reason fit into? And I'm not saying reason can't fit into all those things. But I think over the time in the future, I'll go back to James Luther Adams again. He says that the prophet is not there to foretell the future. He's not there to foretell the future. So when I say where are we going, I'm not talking about foretelling the future. Importantly, he says therefore to tell forth from the past, to tell forth from the present. This is where we are and this is where we're going. It's not foretelling, it's telling forth. And that is the role of the prophet. So I think we will see some shift. I hope to see some shift away from that ontological way of gauging ourselves by the faces which we see as opposed to the actions which we take. We can go back to orthopraxis as opposed to orthodoxy or orthoessences. And I also think we will see perhaps some of the reclaiming of those larger, stronger trends which have run through our history. So that's where we're going. Now here's that shift I was telling you about that's not going to be gentle. When I was in radio, sometimes you were playing a song and all you could do is put what I would call a collision seg. One song will not go into the other, but it's got to, so you just close your eyes and you just let it go and you hope for the best. This is our annual meeting today. This is an expression of who this community is. There is an organism of the community and an organization of the community. And this is about the organization of the community, which is not identical to the organism, but it is an important aspect of it. There's a lot of things going on in our world right now. In this church, we have really started to get things in gear in the last 3 years. We're doing things that we weren't doing, certainly during COVID, but even the period of time immediately before COVID. And when that happens, there's tensions. Toes get stepped on. When I went to the Unitarian Universalist Leadership School in, I think it was 1993, you're broken into groups and you're given the responsibility of creating a day's worship. And one of the title we got was, "It Hurts When Buds Burst." And I'm thinking now of a little scenario for you. And that is that there's a person who's sitting in a room in front of what has been promised to be the most important flower in the entire world. It's said that this flower blooms more beautifully than any other. It's a rose, but it has rose colors unlike any other color. But they're very short-lived. They only show for a second or two after the bud opens and becomes the flower. And the person sitting there goes there every day. Now, it takes about 5 weeks for a rose to go from a bud to a bloom. From the time the first appearance of a bud, it takes about 5 weeks. And so for 5 weeks, this person's been going down there. And it said that whoever views this thing blooming on its first bloom, in the first moment, is going to have luck for the year. And so this person went down there every day, hoping to score that luck, staring at that bloom. And though it was a bud, it was a little bigger bud, but every day it was still a bud. One day the person goes down there and first light comes into the room and flashes on it. And the person cries. And somebody said, "Why are you crying?" And somebody speculates, well, maybe it's because when that one shaft of light came in, it got in his eye and it was irritating, and that's why he was crying. I said, no, I don't think so. So I said, well, it's because it's so beautiful. I said, well, it could be. It was a beautiful, maybe he is set for luck for the rest of the year. But when I asked, the person said, it hurts when buds burst. I had become so identified with that bud that when it burst into a flower, although it was beautiful, I could feel the pain of its flowering. It hurts when buds burst. Change creates tension. Things are changing. They're always changing. We know that. Heraclitus said the only common thing in the world, the only permanent thing in the universe is change. And I think that's right. The world also is, to say it's at wit's end right now is an understatement. Anger is everywhere. I can't even turn on the news without getting angry, usually within 25 or 30 seconds. Those tensions build up in us and they come out. Sometimes they come out in places that are appropriate, like on King's Day. Sometimes they come out as tensions in our family and our friends where we've just fed up with things so much and we can't take one more thing. Things change. And that's actually the reason I picked the first hymn of the day, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, because that next to the last verse was, don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. So our history is what creates us. I think if you take and look at our response to anything in the world as a community, it will be found by those levels that we see in our history. We drill down into our history as if we're drilling down for something precious below the ground. And that's what fills us in. That's what we draw out of there. We draw out of there that notion of the individual, of freedom, of our use of reason. We draw out of there all these other values which we express. And we find a way to make sense of what we have done. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Amen.
Our next hymn is number 318. We will be one. We would be one.
Thank
I don't know. But I'm planning to enjoy the ride. How about you? Amen.
That concludes the recorded portion of our service. We will continue with trail march. You're invited to come forward.